$250 per night. I stared at my screen, stunned. My cherished lake house was being rented out to strangers without my knowledge. The listing had dozens of glowing 5-star reviews, and it was clear that the meticulously groomed HOA president had turned my family retreat into her personal moneymaker, even using my own photos to promote it. The sheer disbelief on her face when I walked through that door, absolutely priceless. She had no idea I'd discovered her little enterprise, let alone that I'd already devised the perfect trap to expose her. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment, because what's about to unfold is a masterclass in sweet, strategic payback. When someone tries to steal what means the most to you, the perfect revenge demands patience, hard proof, and the satisfaction of watching them squirm as their kingdom collapses. It all began with a notification while I was coding in my San Francisco apartment. As a remote software engineer, I was no stranger to surprise messages. But the email from Olivia Martinez made my stomach drop. "Noah, I think someone's renting out your lake house. There have been different people staying there every few days. I thought you should know." She attached a link to the listing, featuring professional photos of the my home down to the smallest detail. I hadn't set foot at the Silver Pine Estates property since inheriting it from Uncle James 6 months earlier. That house was my sanctuary. After losing my parents at a young age, I'd spent every summer there with him fishing, watching sunsets over Crystal Lake, and making memories that would last a lifetime. Now, someone was cashing in on it behind my back. As I scrolled through the listing, confusion turned to fury. There was a photo of me on the dock, fishing rod in hand, captioned, "The friendly owner will share his best fishing tips." It was an old photo I'd shared on social media years ago, but that wasn't even the worst of it. In other photos, I noticed a woman showing off the kitchen, her wrist adorned with a Rolex far too expensive for a typical property manager. Designer shopping bags peeking out in the background told me everything I needed to know. Someone with expensive tastes was turning my home into their personal cash cow. I didn't waste a moment. I booked the next flight to Colorado. Silver Pine Estates was just as I remembered: pristine lawns, stately homes, and the glimmering waters of Crystal Lake. I went straight to Olivia's house. She'd been a good friend to Uncle James, and her worried expression said everything before she even opened her mouth. "Noah, thank goodness you're here," she said, her voice low and urgent. "It's been strange. Diane Morgan, the HOA president, has been bringing people to your house for months now. She told everyone she had your permission to manage it while you were away." Olivia leaned closer. I overheard a collector calling her about some overdue debt. She tried to brush it off, but she was clearly panicking. That fancy lifestyle of hers might be more show than substance. I felt my blood begin to boil. Diane Morgan had apparently taken the HOA's strict rules to a whole new level in my absence, banning windows from being open more than 45 degrees, prohibiting fishing after 7 p.m., and enforcing every bizarre rule with hefty fines. And the worst part? She had keys to every house in the neighborhood under the HOA's emergency access policy. "She's never used them like this before," Olivia whispered. I was furious, but I knew rushing in unprepared wouldn't get me the full story. I needed evidence. Back in my rental car, I pored over the listing photos again, piecing together a plan. Then something caught my eye. Tucked in a drawer in my uncle's study, a framed photo I'd never seen. Uncle James, years younger, with his arm around a woman at the lake. She looked oddly familiar, but there wasn't time to dwell on it. I called my best friend from college, Jason Brooks, a real estate lawyer. "Jason, I need your help. Can you book this place for tomorrow night? I don't want Diane to recognize my name if she's running this racket," I explained. He agreed right away. I also learned that Crystal Lake Luxury Rentals, the name listed on the site, didn't even exist in any official business registry I could find. That night, I parked across the street from my house and watched. Lights flickered on inside. A luxury SUV pulled into the driveway, and out stepped a woman in her early 50s, dressed to the nines with the confident swagger of someone used to getting her way. A driver followed, carrying several designer shopping bags. "Diane Morgan, no doubt." I texted Jason, "You won't believe what's happening. I need your legal expertise. Get here as soon as you can." As she walked inside my house like she owned it, I felt a surge of rage and determination. She didn't know that when I inherited the house, I'd installed security cameras clearly posted with signs she had apparently ignored. Tomorrow night, I muttered to myself, I'll be checking in as a guest in my own home and host Diane won't even see it coming. The next evening, I stood at my own front door with a small weekend bag, my heart hammering in my chest. As I rang the doorbell, Jason's booking had been accepted and I was posing as Nathan Brooks, using his ID to check in. The door swung open to reveal a young man in his late 20s, his eyes darting nervously as he introduced himself. "Hi, welcome to Crystal Lake Retreat. I'm Ryan. I help out around the property," he said, stepping aside to let me in. Stepping over the threshold of my own home, the surrealness of it all nearly took my breath away. Everything looked nearly as I remembered, yet subtly different. Furniture shifted around, new D8 copyright core items scattered about, and my family photos nowhere in sight. Ryan showed me around, clearly uneasy when mentioning some of the newer features. "The owner has great taste," I remarked lightly, watching his face carefully. Ryan's expression flickered with a hint of guilt. "Yeah, my broken bar the owner's rarely here. My mom takes care of everything." Before I could push him for more information, the front door swung open again, and in walked Diane Morgan herself, a HOA president, unauthorized landlord, and apparent con artist. She radiated the same calculated polish I'd seen from across the street the night before, from her flawless hair and designer wardrobe down to that flashy Rolex glinting on her wrist. "You must be Mr. Brooks," she said, a forced smile on her lips as she extended her hand. "I'm Diane Morgan, the property manager for Noah Whitman. He's an old friend of mine and trusts me completely with his lovely home." I shook her hand, forcing my own smile to stay in place. "So how do you know the owner?" I asked innocently as Diane led me through my own kitchen. She launched into an elaborate narrative, painting herself as a devoted friend handling everything for Noah while he was busy with his tech job in California. Each lie she told sent my blood pressure spiking, but I kept my face politely interested. When she demonstrated how to use the entertainment system, I played along. "I thought you had to smack these old TVs to get them to work like back in the 90s, I said, feigning cluelessness. Diane laughed dismissively. "Oh no, dear, this is the best of the best," and Noah spared no expense. Inwardly, I was already planning to play back this entire conversation for her later. The real gut punch came when we reached the living room. There, prominently displayed on the mantel, was a framed photo of my parents and Uncle James, an intimate keepsake I'd carefully placed in the study. Diane had moved it to become part of her carefully staged rental charm. "The owner must have such a lovely family," I said, my voice tight as I fought to keep my anger in check. Diane nodded, oblivious to who I really was. "Yes, such a tragedy about his parents, but his uncle raised him well before he passed. Of course, Noah is far too busy to come out here anymore, so arrangements like this just make sense for everyone." She spoke so casually about my life and losses that I had to bury my fists in my pockets to stop them from shaking. As the tour wound down, I made sure to check the security cameras I'd installed. Their indicator lights still blinked from their hidden spots, and this property under video surveillance. Signs, though partially covered by Diane's knickknacks, were still visible. I was careful to document everything, snapping photos of the rooms, recording our exchanges on my phone. At one point, Diane pulled out a sheet of HOA rules for guests, absurd guidelines like no opening windows beyond 45 degrees and quiet hours start at 8 p.m. I nodded politely, mentally noting every ridiculous rule. Then Diane was called away to handle some urgent HOA business, leaving me alone with Ryan. He seemed increasingly uneasy as we chatted. "I'm just helping out because a broken bar," he trailed off with a sigh. "My mom really needs the money lately." That confession confirmed what I already suspected about Diane's finances. As Ryan excused himself, I caught him glancing back at the family photo on the mantel, his expression hard to read. Finally alone, I began a careful search of the house. In the study, I discovered that my uncle's safe had been tampered with. Inside, where important documents should have been, was a folder of HOA paperwork and my signature forged across them. Diane hadn't just been renting out my house. She was rewriting HOA rules and, from the look of it, possibly embezzling money under my forged authorization. I called Jason immediately, "It's worse than we thought," I told him, outlining the forged documents and Diane's scheme. Jason's lawyer's instincts kicked in. He warned me about the serious legal ramifications and told me what evidence to prioritize gathering. While we were still talking, I spotted an envelope that had slipped behind the desk, a letter from Uncle James. It was cryptic, with a mention about telling my son the truth, but I didn't have time to puzzle it out. Just then, a message popped up. Ryan again. He warned me Diane would be back in the morning with a special guest for a property inspection. "She's planning to sell the house." Ryan's text read, "Be careful." The game had shifted, and I needed to be ready. I checked all my hidden cameras one last time to make sure they would catch everything Diane tried to pull the next day. If Diane wanted to play house, she was in for a surprise. She had no idea who she was really hosting or what I was about to expose. The next morning, golden light poured through the windows as I sipped my coffee on the deck, the picture of a relaxed vacationer taking in the view. In truth, I was bracing myself for the showdown to come. I was gearing up for a showdown. After uncovering the full scope of Diane's duplicity, I'd spent half the night meticulously documenting everything and relaying it to Jason, who was already en route. A soft knock at the sliding door snapped me out of my thoughts. It was Amber Reynolds, the woman staying in the guest suite across the house. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" she said, joining me with her own mug of coffee. "I'm a freelance writer, came here to soak up some inspiration. Didn't expect all this drama with the property manager." Curious, I asked what she meant. Amber rolled her eyes. "Yesterday, Diane charged me an extra $150 for excessive water usage because I took a bath instead of a shower. Said it was some kind of HOA conservation regulation. Is that even legal?" Our chat revealed that Diane had been shaking down guests for phony violation facet charges that never made it onto the official rental platform. Amber also mentioned she'd noticed odd comings and goings at strange hours, including Diane giving late-night tours to what looked like prospective buyers. "I'm a night owl," Amber said. 2 nights ago, I saw her showing the place to a guy in a suit at midnight. It felt shady." That detail confirmed Ryan's earlier warning. After Amber went back to her writing, I shot a text to Olivia, asking if she could meet me at a local cafe. Copyright. As someone who'd lived here a long time and had been keeping an eye on Diane's activities, Olivia would be essential in piecing this puzzle together. Olivia arrived at the cafe. Copyright, looking nervous but determined. "I've been documenting Diane's HOA abuses for months," she admitted, sliding a notebook across the table. Inside were detailed notes, arbitrary fines, new rules implemented without a proper vote, suspected financial misconduct, everything. "She's been terrorizing homeowners with these made-up rules," Olivia whispered. "People are too scared to stand up to her because she threatens them with property liens or humiliates them at community meetings." She paused, then leaned in. "And that's not all. I think she's renting out at least 2 other houses in the neighborhood, homes owned by seasonal visitors. The Spencers place down the road and the Hendersons' cabin on the North Shore. They're both overseas this year." The scheme was even bigger than I'd realized. Just as Olivia wrapped up her explanation, Jason arrived. He quickly grasped the severity of the situation. "What she's doing crosses so many lines," he said, scanning through my photos and notes. "Forgery, trespassing, fraud, and she may even be embezzling HOA funds. But we need to be smart about how we take her down. HOAs can be surprisingly powerful, and she's clearly consolidated control." We devised a strategy: keep gathering evidence, connect with other homeowners affected by Diane's scams, and prepare for a carefully orchestrated confrontation that would maximize our legal leverage. As we talked, I got a text from Ryan. His mother was on her way to the house with her investor friend, set to arrive in 30 minutes. It was time to head back and see what she was really planning. Back at the house, I was rifling through some papers in my uncle's old desk when I came across something that made my stomach drop: a crumpled receipt in the trash. It showed Diane had used home maintenance funds to buy a designer handbag. Proof of financial misconduct, right there in black and white. I quickly slipped the receipt into my pocket just as I heard Diane's voice at the front door. I moved to the living room, pretending to be lounging casually. Diane swept in, her practiced smile in place, but this time she was accompanied by Ryan and an older man in an expensive suit. "Nathan," "I'm so sorry to intrude," she cooed. "We just need to do a quick inspection. This is William Foster, a maintenance specialist." The lie was transparent. William's demeanor screamed real estate investor, not handyman. "The current tenant will be vacating early," Diane told William in a low voice, assuming I couldn't hear. "The owner's desperate to sell and has authorized me to handle everything he's overseas." "Of course." William nodded, scanning the property with a developer's eye. "I heard him mention something about lakefront potential and a $700,000 starting for a figure well below the house's real value of $1.2 million. Not only was Diane illegally renting out my home, she was trying to sell it at a massive discount, likely to cash out quickly for her own gain. The betrayal was so outrageous I couldn't keep up the act any longer. Taking a steady breath, I stepped into the room where Diane and William were discussing renovations. "Actually," I said evenly, "the owner isn't overseas, and he certainly hasn't authorized any sale." The room went silent. Diane's expression shifted from confusion to horror as I continued. "I'm Noah Whitman. This is my house and you're trespassing." William's eyes widened as he glanced between us, clearly taken aback. Diane's mask slipped, and her voice rose in protest. "That's absurd," she spluttered. "This man is obviously delusional." "William, I have all the paperwork but I was ready." I pulled out my ID and the property deed, laying them on the table for all to see. "I inherited this house 6 months ago from my uncle, James Whitman," I said firmly. "I never gave anyone permission to rent it out, manage it, or certainly not to sell it." William Foster looked visibly uneasy and inched back toward the door. "I think I should come back another time, Diane," he said, and before leaving, he slipped me his business card. "If you ever do decide to sell, please contact me directly." Diane's embarrassment quickly turned to anger. "You can't just barge in here," she shouted, her voice rising. "I have authorization papers with your signature." "Forged papers," I corrected her coolly, "and I didn't barge in. I booked and paid for a stay in my own house, just to catch you in the act." Ryan, standing by the window, stayed quiet, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Diane, realizing she couldn't intimidate me, grabbed her phone and dialed the police, claiming I was an intruder who had broken into her client's property. Things had escalated beyond what I'd expected. While we waited for the police, I calmly opened my laptop on the dining table, pulling up the security camera feeds and the documents I'd compiled. Diane paced the room, alternating between threats of lawsuits and offers to work something out in private. When 2 police officers arrived, the tension in the air was palpable. Diane launched right into her story, painting herself as the victim of my so-called intrusion. "I've been managing this property for months with the owner's full consent," she declared, thrusting a folder of paper semi-forged signature prominently displayed into the officer's hands. I stayed calm. "I have my identification, the deed, and footage from my security cameras showing Diane entering this house multiple times, bringing in personal belongings and giving tours to potential buyers," I explained. "The cameras are legal and have notices posted throughout the property," even though Diane tried to cover them up. Ryan, in a rare moment of integrity, didn't back up his mother's story. He just stared at the floor, clearly torn. The officers exchanged glances. Then one of them said, "This looks like a civil dispute over property management. We can't determine who has rightful access right now, but the deed does confirm Mr. Whitman's ownership." They advised that neither party change the locks or restrict access until things were resolved in court. As they were about to leave, I caught Diane whispering something to the senior officer, who nodded with an uneasy familiarity. The implication was obvious, as she had some pull with local law enforcement. "We'll be keeping an eye on the situation," the officer told me, his tone more warning than reassuring. I'd won this round, but as Diane stormed out, shooting daggers in my direction, I knew the real fight had just begun. No sooner had the police left than I got a security alert on my phone. My indoor cameras had been disabled, despite the officer's explicit instructions not to tamper with anything. I raced back to the house, only to find the locks changed. Through the window, I saw Ryan frantically stuffing papers into a bag while Diane spoke animatedly on the phone. I banged on the door, but they ignored me completely. Furious, I called the police again, but the dispatcher said it would be at least an hour before they could send anyone. The timing was suspicious, confirming my fear that Diane had connections shielding her. I retreated to my car, trying to regroup, and called Jason for an update. "She's escalating faster than we thought," Jason said grimly. "She knows she's been exposed, so she's trying to control whatever evidence is left inside. Document everything, but don't let her provoke you, as she'll use any excuse to twist the narrative." As we spoke, I got a text from William Foster, the investor. "Diane told me you're having some kind of mental health episode and falsely claiming ownership. Are you really the owner? This all seems a broken bar complicated." Diane was already spinning a story to discredit me. I was explaining this to Jason when Ryan slipped out of the house and hurried to his car. On impulse, I approached him. "Ryan," I said quietly, "you know your mother is in the wrong here." He froze, torn between loyalty and guilt. "You don't understand," he said finally. "She's desperate. The medical bills, the failed investments, a broken bar. She's about to lose everything." It didn't excuse what Diane was doing, but it at least explained the desperation driving her. Before I could reply, Diane came out of the house, now accompanied by a man she loudly introduced as the HOA's attorney. She thrust an official-looking document at me. "You're in violation of multiple HOA regulations," she declared with smug satisfaction. "You owe $15,000 in fines, and until you settle them, the HOA has restricted access to this property." She gestured to the man beside her, who nodded gravely. "We've received reports of structural issues," he added. "We need to conduct immediate inspections, so temporary access restrictions are in effect." Jason had arrived by then and scanned the document, frowning. "These violations are backdated to before Noah even inherited the property," he pointed out. "This is pure harassment, Diane, and you know it." I took a deep breath. "You're manufacturing these violations because I caught you illegally renting out my house," I said evenly. For a moment, Diane's polished facade cracked. "You abandoned this community," she shot back. "6 months, and you haven't attended a single home meeting or even introduced yourself to the neighbors." She stepped closer, lowering her voice, her tone dripping with self-righteousness. "People like you buy vacation homes and then just let them rot, dragging down everyone else's property values. I was doing this neighborhood a service." Her attempt to justify her theft only made me more irresolute. "By stealing from me and lying to everyone?" I shot back. "How many other empty homes have you rented out, Diane? How much of the HOA's money have you funneled into your designer wardrobe?" The HOA attorney tried to defuse the confrontation, but Jason stepped forward, ready to back me up. "I'll need to see the actual HOA bylaws that give you the authority to change locks based on vague structural concerns, and who prepared this so-called structural report. Why wasn't the property owner informed before any action was taken?" His questions came fast and sharp, poking holes in their flimsy narrative. The attorney stammered, claiming the documents were at the office, just as more neighbors started gathering, drawn by the escalating scene. Diane's confident posture faltered. She grabbed the attorney's arm and retreated into the house, locking the door behind her. Ryan stayed in his car, visibly distressed but too conflicted to act. Forced out of my own home, I checked into a hotel with Jason. "She's counting on you to give up," he said as I paced the room. "That's how these HOA battles usually go. People get worn down by the cost, the stress, the neighborhood gossip. But she didn't expect you to have evidence of real criminal activity, not just HOA rule breaking." We spent the evening building a strategy. Jason split our efforts, one track to challenge Diane personally for her fraudulent actions, and another to question the HOA's authority to lock me out. While we worked, I received an email from my security company. Their system had been manually disabled from inside the house, an outright violation of the police's instructions. Looking out the window, I saw Diane's car pull into the hotel parking lot. "She's following me," I realized, my disbelief turning to anger. Later that evening, returning from dinner, I found a letter slipped under my hotel door. It was an official-looking notice from the HOA, claiming I owed more than $15,000 in backdated fines, dating back to months before I'd even inherited the property. The letter threatened to place a lien on my home if I didn't pay, potentially forcing a sale to cover the costs. Jason read through the letter with a frown. Some of this language doesn't even match Colorado's HOA laws, he said, his concern growing. We need to see the real HOA covenants, not this junk Diane's been using. Just then, I got an email from Ryan, sent to the rental account I'd used. It was a structural engineering report, labeled confidential HOA emergency action required. It was clearly fake, citing made-up foundation issues to justify the lock changes. But Ryan had made a key mistake. The document's metadata showed it had been created just a few hours earlier, not weeks ago as it claimed. Even more damning, the original recipient list included several HOA board members, a proof of who was in on Diane's scheme. This is exactly what we need, Jason said, his expression brightening. Documented evidence of fraud and conspiracy. I didn't know if Ryan had sent the report by accident or if he was quietly trying to help. Either way, it was the breakthrough we needed. Looking out at the lake's dark waters, I felt a surge of determination. My uncle's home, the place I'd spent some of the best moments of my childhood. I wasn't just a pawn in Diane's twisted game. I had been ready to give up, I admitted to Jason. But she had pushed me too far. It was time to show her what happens when you steal from someone with nothing left to lose. The next morning brought a new shock. While Jason met with the county clerk to get certified copies of the real HOA covenants, I discovered Diane had launched a smear campaign against me. Several neighbors emailed me, forwarding Diane's messages. She was calling me an absentee owner whose neglect was driving down property values and who was now making false claims to avoid paying legitimate HOA fines. One sympathetic resident even asked if I was really the mentally unstable squatter Diane described me as. She'd created an entire narrative, complete with a fake timeline of events that portrayed her as the victim of my supposed harassment. My initial anger was quickly replaced by a cold, steady calm. If she was resorting to these lies, it meant she knew she was losing control. Jason came back from the county clerk with the real HOA documents. These rules Diane's been quoting, they're completely made up, he said, spreading out the papers. The real covenants don't give the HOA the power to change locks, fine you like this, or force you to sell. She's been enforcing her own made-up rules. When I asked why no one had challenged her before, Jason sighed. Most people just go along because they're intimidated. HOA disputes can get messy and expensive. Diane spent years making sure that anyone who questions her becomes her next target. This revelation strengthened our legal position, but it didn't solve the immediate problem. I was still locked out of my own home. I was weighing my next steps when I received a surprising text. Ryan wanted to meet at a local coffee shop. Suspicious it might be a setup, I asked Jason to wait nearby, just in case. When I arrived, Ryan was already there, hunched over his coffee, looking exhausted and haunted. I can't keep doing this, he said without preamble. What my mother is doing, it's wrong. It's been wrong for years, but this is different. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were financial records showing that Diane had siphoned over $200,000 from the home maintenance fund into her personal accounts over the last 3 years. The folder also contained emails about her plan to sell my house at a steep discount to a developer friend, in exchange for a secret consulting fee. She's underwater financially, Ryan whispered. Bad investments, medical bills she won't tell anyone about, a broken bar and a lifestyle she can't actually afford. She's terrified of losing her status in the community. The documents were damning enough, but what he said next hit even harder. There's something else, he added, pulling out a worn letter. I found this in my mother's desk. It's from your Uncle James. The letter, dated shortly before my uncle's death, referenced a past relationship and expressed regret for keeping the truth from Ryan. A chill went through me. Ryan continued, his voice barely audible. I think your uncle was my father. My mother never talks about my dada, just that he abandoned us before I was born. But I found old photos, letters, a broken bar. I think they had a relationship that ended badly. That's why she hates him so much. That's why she hates you. The possibility left me reeling. Could Diane's vendetta be rooted in a decades-old romantic grudge? Was Ryan actually my cousin? My mind was still spinning when Ryan's phone buzzed with messages from Diane, demanding he return home immediately. She's calling an emergency home meeting tonight to start foreclosure proceedings, he warned, standing to leave. She's pushing it through while you're locked out. claiming ongoing violations. Most of the board just rubber stamps whatever she wants. Before he left, Ryan pressed a key into my hand for the back deck door. She changed the front locks but forgot about this one. I made a copy. There was a quiet understanding in his eyes, an acknowledgement of the weight of his betrayal. After he left, I sat for a moment, trying to process the flood of revelations, the financial fraud, the personal vendetta, and the shocking possibility of a family connection. Jason and I wasted no time. The emergency meeting would be the perfect opportunity to expose Diane's corruption in front of the entire community. We used the documents Ryan had provided to build a rock-solid presentation. Olivia joined our effort, helping us rally as many homeowners as possible to show up in person, rather than letting Diane manipulate proxy votes. By late afternoon, we'd gathered a coalition of residents who were fed up with Diane's bullying but had been too intimidated to speak out before. "This isn't just about your house anymore," Olivia told me as we finalized our plan. "It's about reclaiming our community from someone who's been abusing her power for years." Using Ryan's key, Jason and I slipped into the house through the back door to retrieve personal items and gather more evidence. The place had been further trashed, drawers overturned, documents scattered, family photos ripped from their frames. The safe was open and empty. We worked quickly, knowing Diane could show up at any moment. I found my laptop hidden under the mattress where I'd stashed it. Luckily, it still contained backup security footage. As we prepared to leave, I spotted a box of my uncle's old cassette tapes dumped out, one tape partially rewound. If Diane had been listening to it, it might be important. I pocketed it for later. Back at the hotel, the gravity of what I was about to do hit me. Fighting Diane would mean exposing painful family secrets, risking a public battle with an uncertain outcome, and prolonging my return to normal life. Selling the house and walking away would be so much easier. Jason seemed to sense my hesitation. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Your uncle fought to keep this house in the family," he said quietly. "He wanted you to have it, not just the property, but the memories it holds." His words cut through my doubt. This house was the last real tie to my family. "You're right," I told him, a renewed determination settling in. I was ready to give up, but Diane's pushed me too far. It's time to end her reign over Silver Pine Estates. The community center was buzzing with tension when we arrived for the emergency home meeting. Word had spread, and attendance was unusually high. Jason and I got there early to set up our presentation, only to find the doors locked with a hastily posted sign. "Meeting relocated to Lakeside Pavilion. Home members only." It was Diane's first counter-move, an attempt to confuse and control attendance. But Olivia had anticipated it. She was already redirecting residents to the new venue. When we got there, a security guard Diane had hired blocked my entry. "Home members only," he repeated mechanically. "I have Miss Morgan's explicit instructions. You're not authorized to attend." Jason showed the guard my property deed and home membership documents, but the guard wouldn't budge. "Fine," I said finally. "I'll wait here." As soon as the guard turned his attention back to the door, I nodded to Olivia. She slipped inside, activating a live video stream to my phone. Thomas Wilson, the reluctant board member who had shared some of the financial documents, was already in place. He'd set up a laptop at the front of the room, ostensibly for meeting minutes, but really it was primed to display our evidence when the time came. Through the video feed, I watched Diane call the meeting to order. She looked confident, clad in an expensive suit and wearing her ever-present Rolex. She had no idea that the truth was about to be laid bare for everyone to see. Diane wasted no time launching into a dramatic monologue about the importance of protecting community standards and how the situation with the Whitman property was jeopardizing them. The meeting's projected agenda listed a vote to impose a lien for significant violations as the main item. She painted me as a careless owner who had abandoned the house, allowing it to decay and ignoring countless home notices. The fines now exceed $15,000. She intoned gravely. "Under our bylaws, we must protect neighboring property values by placing a lien. If the violations remain unaddressed, it may require a forced sale." Of course, she didn't mention that most of those violations were either exaggerated or existed long before I inherited the house. When Diane opened the floor for discussion, She only acknowledged those who supported her position, cutting off any dissent. But just as she was about to call the vote, Olivia stood up, unrecognized by Diane. "Before we vote," she said firmly, "I think we should discuss some concerning financial discrepancies in our HOA accounts." Diane immediately tried to shut her down, citing the agenda, but Olivia didn't back down. She walked to the front of the room, tablet in hand, and quickly connected it to the presentation system. "I've prepared a brief review of our HOA finances that everyone might find relevant to today's decision," she said. Diane physically tried to block the screen, but Olivia started handing out printed packets to the homeowners titled "Top 10 Craziest HOA Rules Diane Made Up," along with financial records showing questionable spending. A ripple of murmur spread through the room as people flipped through the packets, disbelief and anger written across their faces. Diane's cheeks flushed bright red. "These allegations are falsely, potentially libelous," Diane barked, her voice trembling with fury. "This is an unauthorized hijacking of official HOA business." But the tide had turned. Thomas Wilson, the normally meek treasurer, stood up. "As treasurer, I can confirm these financial records are accurate and deeply troubling," he said, his voice growing in strength. "We've never had a proper audit under Diane's leadership." Despite my repeated requests, residents began asking pointed questions about expenditures and the actual text of the HOA's governing documents. Jason, who had managed to slip inside during the confusion, walked to the podium with official county records. "The filed HOA documents do not grant the powers Miss Morgan has been exercising," he said, his voice ringing out in the stunned silence. Sensing her grip slipping away, Diane made one last, desperate play. She pulled out her phone and began a live stream. "I'm recording this harassment for legal purposes," she announced. "These people are attempting to undermine legitimate HOA authority with baseless accusations." But her plan backfired spectacularly. Unbeknownst to Diane, Ryan had already accessed her phone and reconfigured her streaming app. Instead of broadcasting her narrative, the stream displayed the damning evidence Ryan had found: her plan to sell my house, the diverted HOA funds, and even her text messages instructing the security company to disable my cameras to clear violations of police orders. The room erupted in chaos as homeowners realized what they were seeing. Diane frantically tried to stop the stream, but the damage was done. At the same time, I joined the meeting via video call on Thomas's laptop, finally able to speak directly to the assembled homeowners. "My name is Noah Whitman," I said, calm and measured. "6 months ago, I inherited this house from my uncle, James Whitman. Since then, Diane Morgan has been renting it out behind my back, pocketing over $15,000 in rental income, forging my signature on HOA documents, and now trying to force a sale based on made-up violations." I shared my screen, showing security footage of Diane bringing in renters, hosting potential buyers, and removing items from the house. Faces shifted from confusion to outrage as the deception became clear. Diane, cornered and exposed, tried to shift tactics, a denial turning to attack. "You don't understand what it takes to maintain a community like this," she shouted, gesturing wildly at the crowd. "I've spent years protecting your property values while you all complain about dues and rules." But her rant quickly turned into finger-pointing at individual homeowners, accusing them of their own violations and destroying what little goodwill she had left. The calls for her resignation grew louder, echoing through the pavilion. Thomas Wilson stepped forward and proposed an emergency vote to remove Diane from the HOA board pending an investigation. The motion passed with overwhelming support. Someone had called the police, and officers were arriving to take statements about the financial allegations that had crossed the line into criminal territory. Realizing she was finished, Diane straightened her shoulders and gave me a cold, steady look. "This isn't over," she said, her voice suddenly calm despite everything crumbling around her. "Noah Whitman isn't the legitimate owner of that property," Diane declared, her voice cold and unwavering. "I have evidence that James Whitman left 50% ownership of the house to the HOA in a second will, one that his opportunistic nephew has conveniently ignored." She held up a document, its signatures neat and apparently authentic. "This house partially belongs to the community, not just to him," she added, a triumphant smile curling her lips. The room fell into a heavy silence as her words sank in. Even with her authority crumbling, Diane had managed to unleash one final twist, one that threatened everything I had fought for. The meeting dissolved into confusion. Police continued gathering statements about the financial irregularities, but Diane's bombshell claim about a second will stole the air from the room. Jason immediately challenged the legitimacy of her document, his eyes scanning it critically. "Any real will would have gone through probate," he said, frowning. "This doesn't look like a valid testament. It seems more like a private agreement, not something legally binding." Diane, still smug, shook her head. "It was executed as a covenant edition, not a traditional will," she insisted. "James and I had an understanding about this property's future." The implication that my uncle and Diane had been closer than I'd ever imagined hung in the air, filling me with questions I hadn't dared consider. As the meeting ended, homeowners drifted out in tense, whispering clusters, their uncertainty mirrored by the doubt creeping into my own mind. Back at the hotel, Jason, Olivia, and I pored over the document Diane had presented. "The signature looks real," I admitted reluctantly, comparing it to other paperwork Uncle James had signed. "But the language of this doesn't sound like him at all. He was extremely private about his property." Jason pointed out multiple legal inconsistencies but couldn't definitively prove forgery without more information. "We need to track down the notary who supposedly signed this," he said. "Margaret Law, so that's our next lead." While Jason worked to find the notary, I remembered the old cassette tape I'd found, half rewound in my uncle's dusty collection. Acting on a hunch, I rummaged through my rental car's glove compartment for a battered portable tape player I'd bought as a nostalgic impulse on a previous trip. I inserted the tape. Static crackled, then my uncle's voice emerged, sending shivers through me. It was a personal audio journal entry from 15 years ago. "Diane came by again today," my uncle's voice said, tired and resigned. "Same conversation, same ultimatum. She wants marriage or nothing. Says I owe it to her and Ryan." A pause, a weary sigh. "I can't do it. Not after how she lied about the pregnancy, tried to trap me. I love Ryan, he's my son, no matter how it happened. But I can't trust Diane, not after I found those debts she hid." The manipulation. "One day, I'll tell Ryan everything, but he's too young now and she's threatened to vanish with him if I push for custody." The recording kept going, weaving a story I had never known. My uncle had once been in a relationship with Diane. Ryan was truly his son, but their relationship had ended in betrayal when he learned of her deceit and financial recklessness. Diane, left to raise Ryan alone, had turned her resentment into a simmering vendetta. This revelation changed everything. Diane's obsession with the property wasn't just about greed, it was personal, rooted in years of rejection and bitterness. The next morning, Olivia helped track down Margaret Lawson, the notary whose stamp appeared on Diane's suspicious document. Now retired and living in a neighboring town, Margaret was hesitant at first to speak, but after some gentle urging, she finally confessed. "I never notarized that document," she said, voice trembling. "Diane came to me about 6 months ago, right after Mr. Whitman died. She asked me to backdate and stamp several papers. She said it was to fix some issues with the HOA paperwork. I knew it was wrong, but she threatened to report some old tax issues from when I briefly worked for her. I felt like I had no choice." We recorded her confession, with her permission. It was the final piece we needed to prove the forgery, clear evidence to bring Diane's schemes crashing down. With the notary's testimony and my uncle's revealing tape in hand, we were finally ready to confront Diane once and for all. Ryan had texted to let me know Diane was making arrangements to leave town temporarily, a proof that she knew her position was crumbling. Jason swiftly filed emergency motions with the county court to invalidate her fraudulent property claim and stop her from fleeing before facing the consequences. When we returned to Silver Pine Estates, the locksmith was already at work, changing the locks under the authorization of the interim HOA board now headed by Thomas Wilson. Finally, legally back in my home, I found signs of Diane's hasty packing and shredded documents, a clear evidence she had been preparing to run. The doorbell rang just as I was taking it all in. It was Ryan, looking exhausted but somehow relieved. "She's at home packing," he said quietly. "The police are there too, with some kind of financial crimes investigator. She sent me to retrieve some papers from here. Boot to broken bar, he trailed off, eyes sweeping the disrupted room. I couldn't do it anymore. The lies, the schemes, watching her hurt people. We sat together on the porch steps, two strangers bound by a complicated family history we hadn't known existed. Did you know? I asked gently. About your father? About James? Ryan shook his head. I suspected a broken bar. There were photos, little comments she'd make when she was drunk, but she always said my father abandoned us, wanted nothing to do with me. I pulled out my phone and played a portion of the cassette recording at the part where Uncle James expressed his love for Ryan and his frustration at being kept away from him. Tears welled in Ryan's eyes as he heard his father's voice for the first time as an adult. She lied about everything, he whispered. My whole life a broken bar built on her lies. Rather than anger, I felt a strange compassion. Ryan was as much a victim of Diane's manipulations as any, maybe more so. He wanted to tell you the truth, I said, showing him the unfinished letter I'd found. I guess that makes us cousins technically. A fragile, hopeful bond began to form between us, a connection rising from the wreckage of Diane's deceptions. Before we could say more, Jason called with news. Diane had been arrested while trying to leave town, caught with financial documents and a large sum of cash. The charges were serious: fraud, forgery, grand theft, and embezzlement of HOA funds. The final confrontation with Diane didn't come in some explosive showdown. It happened 2 weeks later in a county courtroom. Overwhelmed by the evidence and deserted by her former allies, Diane accepted a plea deal. She would avoid jail time but had to pay restitution, do community service, and sell her house to repay the people she had wronged. When asked by the judge to explain herself, Diane's mask finally cracked. He rejected me, she said bitterly, glaring at me as if I were James. He had everything: this perfect house, the perfect life, everyone loved him. He denied his own son, kept that damn lake house in the family. It was clear she had rewritten history in her mind, twisting her failures and resentments into excuses for her crimes. The judge was unmoved. Personal disappointment, no matter how deep, does not justify harming others, he said firmly. In the aftermath, Silver Pine Estates underwent a transformation. Thomas Wilson spearheaded a complete overhaul of the HOA, implementing new transparency measures and fairer rules. My house was fully restored to me, and Diane was ordered to repay all the rental income she had wrongfully collected. But more than that, I gained something unexpected, a family connection I hadn't known existed. Ryan and I began a careful relationship, sharing memories of Uncle James and discovering surprising similarities we'd never anticipated. I decided to spend more time in Colorado, working remotely when possible so I could be at the lake house that had once been a battleground. 1 year later, I hosted a gathering for all the neighbors, turning a place of fear into a place of community. Olivia and I had grown closer through everything, our friendship deepening into something neither of us had planned. Amber came back too, this time as a real guest, incorporating the saga into a novel she was writing. As the sun set in gold and crimson across the lake, I found a quiet moment to hang a restored photo of Uncle James on the cabin wall, adding a small plaque beneath it. Not everyone who comes to this lake is here to fish. Some come to reclaim truth. Ryan joined me, now pursuing the art career his mother had always discouraged. He looked more at peace than I had ever seen him. Outside, I posted a new sign at the end of the driveway, "Not for sale," painted over a little logo that had become a local meme. "Ho Karen's tears." Diane's manipulations had given way to something better. What started as a personal victory became a renewal for the whole community. As I looked out across the water, I realized this had never just been about property. This house, this lake, they mattered not for their material value but for the memories they held. And now, they were the foundation for something new, with family I never knew I had. In the end, Diane's desperate attempt to take what was never hers had, ironically, restored what was truly ours: truth, justice, and the comforting sense of home. We don't make these stories up. Real people are just this wild. Ya Stories proves Ida, so hit the bell so you don't miss the next unbelievable episode.